I shouldn't have exited out. I should have just switched my screen. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, and we're here with Professor Danjuma Bihari. How are you doing this evening? Assalamu
Assalamu alaikum.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, as best as can be expected given my particular circumstances, which many people are well acquainted with, not so much other people, but it is what it is. And we say, Allah, I have to say, make the dua, Allah ishvini, and may Allah give me health, inshallah. I'm making that dua for myself. And I should make that dua for everyone, actually. May Allah bring us, restore us, bring us to health, inshallah.
I mean. Well, you look nice today. I really dig the colors that you're wearing. It really goes with the weather outside. I see how
Clouds,
the sun is shining off your shirt.
the sky and the clouds.
Exactly. Well, you know what, Danjuma, I really don't know much about you besides seeing you on social media, on YouTube, such places like Content Over Everything and on other platforms. And I'm friends with you on social media. To be honest, the first time I became aware of you, I came across two videos uploaded onto YouTube. One was titled Geography, the Mother of History, and Berbers, Are They African People? And I have to tell you, after hearing the talk you gave on geography, the mother of people, that next semester when I was in uni, I enrolled in a geography class so I can get a better understanding of geography because that talk inspired me so much. And similarly with the Berber talk, the talk on our Berbers, African people, that's actually how I found a way to kind of come in contact with you through Facebook. I was talking to a friend of mine who was a mutual friend of ours, Zainab, and I was telling her about your talk because she's Algerian. And I was like, oh, there's this really cool talk on YouTube talking about Berber people. Are they African? I know that North Africans sometimes are looked at by other Africans as not being African. And I thought that your talk was really fair and balanced. And it informed me a lot of things I didn't know. And she had told me, well, I know Danjuma, and I visit him. He's on Facebook. You should send him a friends request. And that's exactly what I did. And I think you accepted shortly after. And from there, I've been friends with you on Facebook. You've communicated with me, liking my posts, commenting, and likewise on yours. And you tagged me in some of yours as well, some of your most thought-provoking posts, I might add. So I just wanted to know, what is your background? I do understand that you're from the Caribbean island of Trinidad. And I wanted to know, what was that like growing up for you?
It was a very rewarding upbringing. In fact, to go back a little before that, I was born in London, not very far from where I'm speaking to you at the moment. I'm speaking to you from Harlesden. I was born in Central Middlesex Hospital, just not very far from here, in 1961. And at the age of 4.5, well, let's say 5, let's do round figures. At the age of 5, I was taken home. My father had completed his studies and he'd come to the end of whatever he wanted to do in England. He came here in 1956 and had intended to spend 3 years after completing his degree, he would return home. In the event, he spent 10 years, but in 1966, he returned home, but in the course of which time, my elder brother, recently deceased, Allah yarhamu, was born in 1959, and I was born in 1961. So we are the first windrush children from the Caribbean to be born here. And I sometimes, in my more perverse moods, say that we were the firstborn who were sacrificed on the altar of the British economy for the windrush, through the process known as windrush.
So are you saying that before you and your generation moved to the UK, there was no, I don't want to say, but no Black presence in the UK? No Caribbeans, no Africans?
Oh, not at all. You had Somalis in this country before the turn of the 20th century. They were here. They were mostly what they had the name like my surname. They were Bahara. They were seamen. They came largely from, the British managed to commandeer the southern part of the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandab, and they had the port of Aden, Aden, which is in the Yemen today. And that became a meeting place for races and cultures: Indians, Omanis, Hadarim, Yemeni, Waswahili, Somalis, and all sorts of people met, and they enrolled in the British Mercantile Navy. So they had ships that plied the Indian Ocean. Some went across as far as India and Indonesia. Others, through when the Suez was opened up, they went to England, and a lot of the Yemeni and Somali settled in Cardiff, Tiger Bay, and other places. So and my grandfather was among those people. So from there, he ended up in Trinidad, where he met my grandmother, who came on the last boat from India in 1917. And they met, and my father met my mother in England. My mother is African Caribbean, but not from Trinidad. She's from Guyana. And her parents, they have other origins. They have different origins, like Suriname. Sorry, the camera moved a bit there. Their origins are in Suriname and other places. And Guyana, being part of the British Empire, was fortunate to the extent that emancipation arrived a lot earlier than in Brazil and in Suriname, the countries nearest to Guyana. So a lot of people embarked upon a process of marronage, escaping, and ended up in Guyana, where they could find themselves as independent and free and emancipated Africans. My mother's people were part of that push into Guyana. From there, of course, Guyana being a part of the whole British Empire, many of the people like Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, during the Windrush period, came to England. As you know, Enoch Powell had done the round. Before he had his Rivers of Blood speech, Enoch Powell had come to the Caribbean. I think his first stop was Barbados, recruiting nurses and transport workers to fill the deficit of those people who had perished during the Second World War. So that it is in that context that a large amount of Caribbeans, African Caribbeans, not just African Caribbeans, came to work, to ended up in England. But so that is not to say, to answer your question directly, that there weren't people coming before. There were drips and drabs before. They had African Caribbeans and Africans coming from the 1940s. I remember Mr. Karamo Kinte, who is the name Kinte is famous because he's one of the unsung contributors to Alex Haley's book, Roots. His name is not Alex Haley. Got the majority of research from him in London. He was living at number 1 Bascom Avenue, Leighton E10. Alex Haley got most of his research, got most of his contacts to go to the Gambia from Mr. Karamo Kinte. Mr. Karamo Kinte was illiterate in English and did not append his signature to anything. And basically, Alex Haley did not give his name a mention.
Wow.
But I knew him personally. I lived in his house. I was very close friends. I'm still friends to his children today. They do a lot of charity work, digging wells and food parcels in the Gambia and so forth, the Kinte boys. And they were little children when I used to stay at their house in the 80s. So there were Africans coming here. There are 2 Ghanaian men, actually. Both of them are Ga, and both of them are Muslim. And one of them lives in Fulham. There's another one, he lives not far from Fulham. I can't remember exactly where he lives, but you can contact them through the Ghana Muslim Union. They're in their 80s, and they came to this country in the 40s too. So I'm not trying to say that the first presence, but the Windrush was the first considerable presence. It was
I was going to ask that. That I couldn't imagine that there was a Somali or Yemeni community like I see today, back before the Windrush. But like you mentioned, there were drips and drops in places.
And of course, another curious thing that I ought to factor into this discussion before we go any further on this same subject is that there was an emigration from the Caribbean to North America about 2 generations before the Windrush. So you have names of people like Louis Farrakhan, whose both parents are Caribbean.
Yes.
Malcolm X, whose mother is Caribbean. There was an imam who was deputized to work for the WCIW in London by Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. His name was Muraduddin. Muraduddin's parents are from Trinidad. And there's a lot more. Of course, names like Stokely Carmichael and other names like that. But
yeah, I was surprised to find that some of the leaders of the some of the Black leaders during that era had roots in the Caribbean. I was shocked, like you mentioned, Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, maternal side, and Stokely Carmichael, and I would have never even thought of him, but yeah, I remember him as well.
His parents are from Trinidad.
Yes.
So, and there's a lot of that. Harry Belafonte, I think he's Jamaican. Both parents are Jamaican, and so on. So what people don't understand is that, yes, we have the windrush that's happening here, but it's kind of happening late, and it has its implications in terms of conversion to Islam, because a lot of the people who converted to Islam in America, African Americans, some of whom have African Caribbean roots, have at least a one generation head start on the African Caribbean converting community in the United Kingdom. So,
and that's something I didn't. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's something I didn't understand when I first moved here, which caused me to put my foot in my mouth, making certain improper comparisons between Black Muslims in the UK and Black Muslims in the United States. But it's exactly as you said. We had a couple generations head start before Black Muslims here. But so when was your time spent in Trinidad if you were born in the UK?
From the age of, let's say 5, it's really 4.5, to the age of 23.
Oh, wow.
So I did primary, secondary, and tertiary education in Trinidad. I was married at the age of 20 in Trinidad. So one forms one's closest bonds of friendship and cultural awakening during these formative years. So it is to that extent, even though I'm the holder of a British passport and I've never relinquished said British passport, that I say I'm Trinidadian, because in terms of cultural outlook, it is my closest cultural affinity would be to Trinidad, even though I am, as they say on the box, produce of more than one country. I am more, the thing I am most. In other words, when people ask you for the short answer, I'm Trini. That's the short answer. I know I'm more than that, but that's the short answer.
And see, that leads me to my next question. My understanding of Caribbeans is that they were just Black, like Black Americans, like African Americans. Even though I find that term problematic because the Caribbeans are in the Americas. And somebody asked me the other day, how do I view Caribbeans? And I said, I see them as African Americans, if you want to talk about it in its literal term, because the region where the Caribbeans are located. But I was surprised to find out how diverse and multicultural the Caribbeans were or are, especially like Trinidad. That it's not just, it might mostly be made up of people of African descent, but there's also people from other countries of other ethnicities. Like I'm aware of Chinese in Jamaica, also Southeast Asians in the Caribbean. Do you come from a multicultural background or family yourself? I think you already mentioned that, but I was just wondering, and you already kind of were leading to that, how did that shape your outlook?
The thing is this, of all the islands, Trinidad must be, of all the islands, and the islands are all, it is as you say, the islands are already very mixed. Of all the islands, Trinidad might be arguably the most mixed. You can point to at least 6 distinct, I'm using the inverted commas, races in Trinidad coexisting. And what's different from places like Jamaica and Barbados is that they are heavily represented. Each ethnic group has a substantial representation, to the extent that many of the groups took longer to creolize, so to assimilate. So in Jamaica, for example, you'll have Chinese like the famous band leader, Byron Lee, of Byron Lee and the Dragonaires. They excel in calypso music more than reggae music. Byron Lee is Chinese, but I don't think Byron Lee speaks a word of Hakka or Cantonese, but a word. Whereas in Trinidad, you will find Chinese whose grandparents, and even down to my generation, that still speak it. It is the same with the Indians in Jamaica or St. Lucia. The Indians there have a very little consciousness of being Indian except from racial phenotype. Whereas in Trinidad, they have their names, they have their religion, they have their culture, they have their family structures. Their language may begin to suffer because they didn't, for a large part, they didn't come as a literate class of people. So they would speak the language, but not necessarily know how to write it using the Sanskrit script or whatever script. The Urdu script lasted, which is a form of Persian Arabic, lasted a little longer because the Muslim community that came from India was very tight-knit. They formed 1/4 of the Indian population that came to Trinidad. So they were quite tight-knit, and they almost acted the way when you think of Jewish communities as minorities in countries, holding very fast to their traditions and keeping them to themselves, because the Indian Muslim viewed himself as a minority in the Indian community within the wider minority of Trinidad. So so that is what distinguishes, and that has its implications for all races in Trinidad. The fact that they are always never too far from a culture that's different. So there's always a sense of compare, contrast, and let's all enjoy. What most distinguished Trinidad up to, I'd say, the 1990s was that sense of inclusion. Now, I'm not saying it was a utopian state. That sense of inclusion did tend to put westernized values in the form of Roman Catholicism, and then perhaps secondly, the Church of England. Those values were at the top of this pyramid of, and at the bottom, where the masses existed at the bottom, the Hindu traditions, the Muslim traditions, and the Orisha, what was left of the Yoruba traditions in Trinidad from West Africa, they were all at the bottom. So there was that, and that began to be, my generation in the 1960s and 70s began to challenge that acceptance of these values as lesser than the Western values that they claimed built this country.
Okay, so I didn't know that. So you're saying that Trinidad, the dominant religion was Catholicism, and Anglicanism.
Yeah. Well, remember the Catholics, Trinidad, as the name suggests, Trinidad was a Spanish colony for about 200 to 300 years. But it was largely underpopulated because it was a stepping off point to the riches of South America. Just like Jamaica Jamaica started off as a Spanish colony, but Jamaica was used as a refueling station on the way to and from Mexico, where they got all that wealth from Moctezuma, all that gold and silver plate and jewels, and they stole from the Aztec Empire. And what they did is, when they were sailing back and forth on those massive ships called galleons, they would stop in Jamaica. They round up their horses, fresh horses. They round up their cattle for beef and for hides. They round up their pigs and their sheep for meat, salted meat, and so on. And that's why Jamaica was left largely undefended. And in 1655, the British, I believe Oliver Cromwell was in charge in England at the time, wrested Jamaica from the Spanish with very little resistance, and later on the same happened in Trinidad in 1789. So that's why, and because Trinidad was left less, the British had less interest in Trinidad than they had in Jamaica. The British culture in Jamaica became more dominant and pronounced, whereas in Trinidad it was left very much to what was left of the Spanish-speaking peons, who are part Carib, part African, and part Spanish in origin. So they were left with the Catholic religion. So up to today, even though the British took over, the British never really, the Church of England never really ousted the Catholics, from prominence in Trinidad. So I went to Catholic schools, like Jesuit schools.
Okay.
And this computer's, the table is not very stiff there. So I went to Catholic schools myself, and both primary and secondary school. And of course, that has its implications. Where do you think that, you're going to school in one tradition, and basically your father is Muslim, your grandmother is a Hindu, and so on. And you're existing at school in one set of values, and at home you're in a different set of values, and in the neighborhood there's a different set of values. So I think these kind of factors make the Trinidadian a very curious and a very broad-minded sort of person. And that is the sort of background that sent me, the moment I came to England, I went to Africa, went to the Sudan. And that was because during my time in Trinidad, I came under the influence of a Muslim group. You may have heard of them if you lived in New York. You're too young to know them. In their Sudanic incarnation, what they were called the Ansarullah movement. And the leader at the time was called Al-Hajj Al-Imam Isa Abdullah Muhammad Al-Mahdi. Al-Mahdi, he called himself. Later on, we found out his name was Dwight York.
Okay, so that leads to my next. When did Islam? Oh, so your father is Muslim, but your mother was not Muslim.
No.
So were you raised? Did your father raise you Muslim?
No. No.
Okay.
We would go to. My dad himself went to the Quranic school after he went to Catholic schools as a child. He went to the Quranic school as a boy, but that was in the evening, more waiting for your parents to collect you rather than actually going to do your letters. And it was the same in my experience. It was more that sort of thing. So our upbringing, my dad had believed this, that we are living in the West, and the way forward was to embrace the culture, the language. It was pointless learning to speak Hindi or Arabic or Kiswahili. He said, look, if you are going to get ahead in the West, you've got to become word perfect proficient in English. So that was my father's upbringing, and that's the sort of upbringing he imparted to us. Yet my father was very conscious and very aware of his deeper roots and very proud of them in ways. And those ways were communicated to me more than to his other children, because we had a butcher shop. And I would spend a lot of time while I was at the business end of things, slaughtering animals, and all the Muslim customers would expect. My dad actually used to sometimes do the kashrut for the Jewish customers. And there's a story about it, about his mother, which I won't go into right now. But my dad, his Muslim customers came and said, look, your boy needs to know how to do this properly. And they taught it to me properly. And basically, I was the sacrificial Muslim in that sense, because I attracted the Muslim customers.
Okay.
So my instruction in Islam really took off as a child, slaughtering animals. And I was at the age of 9 when that happened. And that my interest in Islam, I remember my dad saying, when I was at the age, let's say, I'm trying to think about this chronologically, because I'm going to confuse the people I'm talking to. When you get to a certain age in the Catholic tradition, you are said to be confirmed. There's a ceremony, a sacrament, I think they call it. You see, I'm actually losing my Catholicism. I think it's called a sacrament. It's called confirmation.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
The first sacrament, I believe, is baptism. Then there's first communion, which I did at the age of 5 or 6. Then at the age of puberty, similar to what the Jews called bar mitzvah,
yes,
you have a ceremony called confirmation. My 2 elder brothers underwent that process, whereby they were given a ring with a monogram, and they were given a saint's name as a middle name, like Saint Michael or Saint, Anthony, whatnot. And you are now officially a Catholic. When it was my turn came, I was the third of the boys, and when my turn came, I said to my father, I don't want any part of this. And my father said, think hard. This is his way. He said, Islam is a very demanding religion. It's a very demanding religion. The last person to practice Islam properly in our family was my grandfather. And my dad said, you see, you take me as you find me. I am a Christian at Christmas. I am a Hindu at Diwali. I am a Muslim at Eid. Right? You take me. So I said to my father, look, they can keep their gold ring and they can keep their name. and I prefer to take my grandfather's name, and I am a Muslim. And that is me, that is at the age of around 12 to 13. So I am the only of the children who actually, and I went at that time to a mosque it's called Jinnah Memorial Mosque. And there was an imam there from Nigeria.
Mhm.
His name was Salahuddin Opoala Tayo. He was sent by Rabita to Trinidad. It was a time when a lot of African Trinidadians, in contact with what was happening in America with Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, were converting to Islam. And this gentleman was instrumental in Africanizing the Islam of the African Trinidadian convert.
Okay.
There are two bodies going, two things are happening here. There's an Indian Muslim community in Trinidad that doesn't, at that stage, as I said, as a minority within a minority, weren't doing that much outreach. Then there's a Lebanese community that keeps strictly to themselves. You wouldn't know that they were among the Lebanese Maronite Christians, that they were Muslims. You would not have known.
I still don't know that to this day.
I would meet them at the mosque, and I know if I go to an Indian mosque and I look, I said, you are not, and they're speaking Arabic to each other. And then you realize, well, they're part of the Lebanese Syrian community, but they're not Maronite Christians. The majority of the Christian, the Levantines in Trinidad are from the Maronite Christian community. And upon arrival in Trinidad, to get ahead, they all switch into Roman Catholicism, or so they say. So maybe Maronite is an Eastern form of Roman Catholicism. I don't know. I don't know enough about the Maronite Lebanese. But what I will say is, what was happening in Trinidad at the time is there were a lot of people becoming Muslim with the whole consciousness of what was happening in America. And, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali came to Trinidad in the 60s or 70s. Okay. He had come. And so I think even Farrakhan came to Trinidad, but the Nation of Islam was not well received. The problem with the Nation of Islam was they came to a country that already understood Islam.
Yeah.
It wasn't like when they went to Belize. I'm told that there's a large NOI community in Belize to this day, because that's where they started and that's all they knew. Whereas in Trinidad, when they arrived, they came and met Muslims there, and they and the Ansarullah were attempting to convince Trinidadians that Trinidadians understood only a part of it, but this is more of what they need to know. In the end, a few people joined the group from Bolshevik Avenue in Brooklyn, the Ansarullah, and even fewer still joined the Nation of Islam. And I think actually the reason why most people didn't take to the Nation of Islam was something as trivial as the Nation of Islam expected you to shave your beard and to wear a suit. And Trinidadians were very averse to that.
I heard you mention that on a video clip uploaded by Content Over Everything, that's one of the reasons why Trinidadians were adverse to the Nation of Islam was wearing the suits. That they didn't want to, they were trying to distance themselves already from a Eurocentric way of being. And they just saw the Nation of Islam with the suits embodying that. So not necessarily embodying that, but with the attire.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you realize that some human beings are attracted to visuals.
Definitely.
A lot of what we do is not as cerebral as people think. And that is why I believe that how you present yourself is a very important dawah. It depends on the community you're talking to. For example, now remember this, we in Trinidad were caught between, the black convert is now caught between, shall I dress like an Indian? Shall I, like the Indian community in Trinidad in the kurta or the, what you call them, shalwar kameez sort of thing. Shall we wear that? Or shall we wear African clothes? Now there are other African groups that have already cornered the African outfit market, the Orisha, the people who practice the Yoruba tradition in Trinidad. So then we've got them, and yet our Imam who came, who was deputized from Rabita, is a Yoruba man himself. So, and he wore his African clothes. So there was that. And then there's the third group, the Ansarullah, who wore Sudanese clothes. And they were very, I think Imam Isa, as he was called back then, was a person with tremendous potential. He knew exactly how to sell a product, and his problem was hubris. He got too big for himself. Really, if he had managed the community with the kind of Sudanocentric ethos, it would have taken off. Now, we started looking at Sudanese clothes as the third wave. We're not dressing like the Yoruba in the African clothes. We're not dressing like the Indians in the Shalwar Kameez. Now we have the Sudan, because what he managed to convince us is that Arabs were black. The original Arabs were black, and the best representative of them can be found in the Sudan. And Arabic is an African language, so he convinced us sort of through the back door. Now, of course, Trinidadians, we have a proverb that I learned at the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Trinidad. I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you, but
no.
I went to the Ethiopian because at a certain point in my life, I became very interested in Rastafari. And even though I'd taken Shahada, I was consorting with Rastafari. And they had begun to attend the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in a part of Trinidad called, let me switch, if this is going to make noise, the phone, I'm going to switch it off.
That's
because
fine.
I think it's going to keep doing that. Yeah, sorry about that. So
that's okay.
I attended this Ethiopian Orthodox Church and I met Abba Gebre Selassie, the Abena, the bishop there. And apparently this church was like the catchment area for all Ethiopian Orthodox in the Caribbean. And I became a personal friend with him. And I remember he taught me a proverb. He said, this is an Ethiopian proverb. To lie about a far country is easy. I'll repeat it. And he said this to me in relation to what I was telling him about Imam Isa being Sudanese.
Yeah.
When I was telling him, Imam Isa is the great grandson of Muhammad Ahmed al-Mahdi, the Sudanese Mahdi. And he just smiled and said, I will teach you an Ethiopian proverb. To lie about a far country is easy. And that inspired me to go to the Sudan.
So how old were you? Because I understand that you took you were inclined to Islam at a very young age.
Yes.
I think you said something like 9 or 10 was when it really kicked off for you. And might I add, I've talked to Sheikh Hassan, and he also converted to Islam at a very young age. Was that
12,
common? Yeah, was that common in Trinidad?
Yes, yeah, because our parents, I'll tell you what, Trinidadian parents are very ecumenical. They don't have that sort of, the kind of reservations you would find in the other islands where Islam was an unknown quantity. Now, Guyana is not an island, so for the purposes of this conversation, I'm not including Guyana, which was very much culturally like Trinidad, except that Guyana is so large that the Indian and African communities lived apart. Because Guyana is a massive land space compared to Trinidad. In Trinidad, there are areas given over to Indians and others to Africans, but the country is so small that it is unavoidable. Contact and intermixing is unavoidable in Trinidad. So we are much more clued up and appreciative of each other's cultures in Trinidad than any other island. So for example, I had a friend who had to leave his island. He was from Montserrat, Ibrahim, friend of mine. He had to leave Montserrat and live in Trinidad because when he became a Muslim in Trinidad and went back to Montserrat and he was wearing, as I'm wearing now, people thought he was mad. They said, why are you wearing your bedclothes in the street? Then literally, and what is this religion? Are you mad? You see, and that happened in a lot of Caribbean, whereas in Trinidad, it was, oh, well, we know this is Islam. We've heard the Azan. Trinidad had, at the time when I was becoming a Muslim, there were already 100 mosques in Trinidad throughout the country. So you couldn't go far without hearing the Azan. When I got married, I lived in a place called San Juan. That's how we pronounce it, San Juan, but we pronounce it San Juan. In the morning, I would wake up to 3 different Azans. There was the Nur al-Islam or Nur Islam in El Socorro. There was the Real Street Mosque and the Ryan Street Mosque. There were 3 mosques. So I could hear the Azan from 3 different directions. And this is not even a Muslim neighborhood. So this I think is what separates Trinidad people. So people like Sheikh Hassan would have come into contact with Islam at a very early age. The first convert to Islam in this country, Sa'adallah, was from Trinidad. And he said to me, when he met Arabs in London, he worked with some Arabs and he became like Lebanese and Egyptians. And he said, but I know this religion from my childhood in South Trinidad. He was from a place called Point Fortin. And he said, I know this religion growing up He said, I know how to make wudu. We had the street pipes, stand pipe, we call it. And you'd see Muslims making the ablutions. Although at the street, said I could actually do it from memory. So I'm familiar with this religion, which is different. It's in stark contrast to what you would have had in Jamaica or Barbados or St. Kitts or any of the other Caribbean islands.
And can I ask, there are other Trinidad Muslims as well, converts, such as is Bilal Phillips from Trinidad?
No, I think his parents are Jamaican. Bilal Phillips and Abdullah Hakim Quick, I believe their parents are Jamaican.
Okay.
But they're Canadian Jamaicans.
Canadian Jamaicans.
In Canada, the impetus to become a Muslim was different. In Canada, the black population, I'm using the word black, black population was so few and far between that they looked for alternative culture to identify with. It was like in America where you could slip into a Brooklyn African-American community. It wasn't like that. In Canada, you stood out. So I think that in Canada, because I had friends who studied at McGill University and came back as Muslim. They felt isolated, and the people that they gravitated to were Muslims, black people, and they became Muslim because of that. So I think Bilal Philip and Abdullah Hakim Quick, both of them, I think their parents are Jamaicans, and they converted as young men. I don't know, I think it happened in Canada when they converted. They're not Trinidadians.
Okay, because I remember hearing something about a schism in how Muslims would name themselves, and how Abdullah Hakim Quick and Bilal Phillips would take an Arabic name and keep their Anglo last name, whereas Trinidadians, such as yourself and Sheikh Hassan, they chose to take a more African or ethnic name and not go the route as just changing your first name and keeping your anglicized name. I remember you hearing something about that on a clip. What was that about?
Two reasons for that. Now, one of the most dynamic forces in Trinidad in the early 70s was a group called the National Joint Action Committee. We call them NJAC, National Joint Action Committee. And they were, in terms of their economic policy, they were very socialist. But they had a cultural dimension to their political program, which is that the cultures of Africa and India and China and the original people, the first peoples of Trinidad, those cultures should be brought to the fore. And they should be respected, and they should be revived, and they should be integrated. And to that extent, we used to have T-shirts printed up, because I was a member of the movement, an active member of that political party and cultural group, and we'd have T-shirts printed up like with slogans like "Any African without an African name is a missing person." Right now, because in Trinidad the Chinese had their names. Mm-hmm. The Indians had their names. The Arabs had their names. So we would say, well, how come the Africans are called Williams and Johnson? And we had a joke whenever we met a white person with a name like Faircloth or something. We'd say, and people laugh and say, "Oh, that's a really English name." We would laugh and say, "No, those were English people who didn't have slaves."
English people didn't.
And to shut that dude up, we'd say, "No, that's maybe that's a white man who never had slaves." And what we're trying to tell them is the names you got, the names you share with the white man, they were slave owners, like Muhammad Ali. Remember when Ali was talking about, "I am now Muhammad Ali, I'm not Cassius Clay." There was a white family who came out and very ungenerously had to say, "Well, we were the people that owned Cassius's grandparents." And that's sort of, and I understand why a man like Muhammad Ali would want to change his name. Of course, in the NOI tradition, they were not aware of African names. But people who were on that search, on that path, like Malcolm X, remember he came back from Nigeria with the name Omowale.
Yeah.
So he's Alhaj Malik Shabazz Omowale. So, it's a developmental process. Now in Trinidad, what was happening is different from most places. We had that NJAC political party that was saying that Indians should have Indian names, Africans should have African names. If people have mixed, they can choose to have mixed names. Why do we need European names? European history is like that Edward Colston statue. It should be removed.
And I remember you saying that you had a problem even with Trinidadians of African origin being classified as Negro and not African.
Yes, that was when it changed. No, as a boy, up to the age of about 15, it was normal in Trinidad to be referred to or to refer to oneself as a Negro. I am a Negro. He's an Indian, he's a Chinese, and I'm a Negro. That's it. It's NJAC who came and said, no, 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 no. We became Negroes. And then Sheikh Tayo came and said the same thing. Sheikh Tayo said, look, from the Quran, call them by their father's names and call things by their right names. These people became Negroes. They are Africans. He said, I look at Yoruba culture where I come from, and I see Yoruba culture in Trinidad. When they speak, they use Yoruba words. The intonation may be incorrect, but it's a Yoruba word. We have people with Yoruba names in Trinidad, like Ojo, the surname Ojo. That was a good friend of mine. It means rain. It's a Yoruba name. So, you know, you had I told there's Kojo, there's Kofi, the Ghanaian, the Akan names. We have loads of them in Trinidad. But, you know, and here's a funny thing. In America, you have a lot of Senegalese names that they do. Gay, Marvin Gaye. Gay is Wolof. It's Serer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's
I come
Wolof.
across a lot of gays.
Exactly.
No
The problem is with the Senegambian names, they sound so European. The Europeans thought that they had already been enslaved by a previous master and had had their names changed. So in Trinidad, in London, there's a political activist called Gus John. John is a very common name in the Caribbean as a surname, John. And a lot of the Johns in Trinidad are jet black and tall, like Wolof and Serer of Senegal. John is John. It's John. It's a Serer Wolof name. Now you have Jack. Jack is another common surname for very dark-skinned people in Trinidad. Jack. Jack is Jack in Wolof. Jack is Jack in Wolof. But because if you heard a slave with that, they would already think, well, somebody's already given him his European name. So there's Gay. And then they have other names that sound like French, like Touré. If you heard the name Touré, it sounds French. It's he's already got it.
There's that famous Senegalese Quran reciter. I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Touré.
Exactly. So you get names like, for example, as I mentioned, that one. And there are so many other names that elide into a European pronunciation that a lot of Wolof names, and the thing with the Gambia or Senegambia, Guinea, the two Guineas, Guinea-Conakry and Guinea-Bissau, and Mali, they all comprise a part of Africa where people have surnames. Most Africans, like most Arabs, didn't have a tradition of surnames. You are the son of your father. Who's the son of your father? You know, I'm not speaking about the matrilineal Akan communities where you didn't even take your mother's name. You acknowledged the matrilineage, but you took the name of your father. But in Senegal and Gambia, if your name was Abdoulaye Diop, now Diop is Job as well. That's the thing. In Gambia, it's pronounced Job. In Senegal, Diop. It sounds like a P. It's like with Arabic, in Arabic, if you pronounce it a certain way, the P and B will elide. So the word for rabbit, you will say Arnab, but it's Arnab. But if you at the end of the word Arnab, it sounds like a P. So with the name of Sheikh Anta Diop, which people can't read properly, so they say Diop. But the name Sheikh Anta Diop.
I'm guilty of that.
The name Sheikh Anta Diop, if you pronounce it in the Gambian Wolof, it becomes Job. But in Senegal Wolof, Diop. And so you have these illusions. So, but to get back to the point about African names, I'll come back to your point. You always have to fetch me back. I go down a rabbit hole.
No, it's okay. I know exactly where to bring you back at.
Yeah. So now, when you get back to name, what happened is we had a bit of a conflict. With due respect to Brother Bilal and Brother Quick, we had a bit of a difference of opinion with them, and I felt that this is me. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for Sheikh Hassan or anybody. So this is my blame. This is my bad. Right? Okay. I said to them straight. There is something that is returning us to the plantation by the retention of these names. We're not out the plantation gate yet. We're still somewhere there. And there is something about that. I said, look, I'd rather take X than keep this name, than call myself Muhammad Williams or Muhammad Jones. I'd rather, no offense to anybody, I know your name is Poole, and I'll be thinking about, I'll be beginning to ask you if you really, are you related to Elijah Muhammad? Are you any relation?
My father told me that we were.
Because Elijah Muhammad, if you look at his features, that guy mixed with Native American.
Yeah, and there's not too many pools either in the States.
Look at Elijah's features. I looked at Elijah. I said, Elijah. If I didn't know, I'd think Elijah Muhammad was an Indonesian. If you just
if you see my grandfather is very light skinned. You would think he was Native American. I even think some my relatives think, back they were part like Cherokee because he comes from North Carolina,
Georgia, and that area where Elijah Muhammad came from is Cherokee area.
Yeah.
So you see, when you said to me about the mixture in the Caribbean, I was about to say to you, actually, if you look at Elijah Muhammad's features, I could see Native American in him. Not in the way that Michael Jackson suddenly decided he was a Cherokee. You look at Elijah Muhammad, you could see Native American in his features.
And then you come to find out the Cherokees owned slaves. They were considered a civilized tribe by Europeans, and they engaged in the slave trade as well. So it would make sense.
But that was the kind of difference we had at the time. We were very much saying we are Muslims, but we come from an African tradition. Trinidad is chock full of Indian Muslims, and they have their Persianized Persianized Indian names. So like Safraz and Mumtaz. Well, Mumtaz is Arabic, but they're Persianized Safraz and Dilshad and Shahzad, and they have those kind of names, and they should have them. Why should they not have them? Similarly, if an African wants to have the name Abu Bakr as Abu Bakari, why can't he have it like that? In Hausa, instead of calling a person by his proper Muslim name, they use a kind of a sobriquet. So for somebody who is called Muhammad, you might call him Innua, the shade, Innua in Hausa. Now, during the time of the Sokoto Caliphate, people began to think that the Hausa form of the name was a bit déclassé, a bit. Sometimes I argue with my Hausa brothers about that, because I remember, I'll give you a joke. I remember going to Tabligh Jama when I first came to this country in 1984. And the person who so kindly took me, was a brother called Babandi Abubakar. He's a Fulani, Hausa Fulani from northern Nigeria. Yeah. And he didn't want to introduce me as Danjuma. Danjuma is a Hausa name. But he felt that the Tabligh Jamaat was Indian or Asian dominated. As you know, in Dewsbury, it's Asian dominated. Definitely. And so what he did is he looked for the name that is masked by Danjuma, which is Adam, and he was introducing me to everybody as Adam. And I said to him, look, I understand what you're trying to do here, but they don't have to look far to see that I'm not Indian, I'm black. And I am proud to call myself Danjuma. And so there was this notion, and I think it came after the rise of the Sokoto Caliphate, that in purifying your Islam, you have to Arabize your names.
Yeah.
And there is a tendency among Hausa to do that. There's another reason for it. The Sokoto Caliphate had a very large number of slaves. In fact, there was a time when the slaves outnumbered the freemen. So when independence came, and later on the colonial period of independence, it would have been politic to have a completely Arabic name, because it would mask your origins. So if you call yourself Jibril Muhammad Ali, I'm Jibril, the son of Muhammad, son of Ali, and you didn't talk about the African name before that, then it would mask whether you were Hausa Banzo or Hausa Bukwai, whether you were a free man or whether you were a slave who was Hausanized. And I think that could be the reason why that happened. But I was shocked, basically, when I went to Nigeria to find that people were a bit hesitant to call me Danjuma. They preferred to call me by an Arabic name.
Okay, and see, that goes to my next set of questions. Well, I guess from what I understood about that, the name thing wasn't so much about politics, but more about symbolism. Is
identity, right? Ethnic identity.
Okay, and you're very intelligent and well-read, knowledgeable. person. I was wondering, sorry, I do have notes here. I'm just trying to
I
organize.
know I've taken you away from your notes. I understand what happened. I
No,
pulled
no,
you away
no,
from
no.
the question.
No, you actually done me a favor, and you've been kind of progressing things along exactly how I would like them. I just wanted to stop right there before we got too far ahead, jump ahead of my notes. But I was wondering, were you always into reading, learning, researching? Was there something that kind of sparked that in you, or that was just the type of environment you grew up in?
My father was an avid reader. He was before he became a butcher, he a self-employed person. He was a teacher. He worked for the Trinidad government as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sent here to further his studies along that line. And instead, he took his own route. He wanted to go into entrepreneurial ways, self-employed. My father believed that, yeah, every day you don't need another pair of shoes, but every day you need to eat.
Yeah.
So he went into food business, chickens and halal meat and all the rest of it. Now, if I don't know if I can turn the camera like this, you see this shelf. It's really hard because the sun is coming through the window. There are many books on that bookshelf belong to my dad.
Okay.
When I left to come to England from Trinidad, I came with a vast trunk of books. So I didn't come here and acquire books. I had a large number of books. We used to collect books. I have books from every different subject, but mostly African history, not ecology and things like that. And, I learned from Professor Ivan van Sertima that he was the head of our Caribbean Historical Society when I was a member of NJAC. And he was a professor who wrote the book They Came Before Columbus. He used to lecture at Rutgers University. One thing he said to me is, look, it is not enough to talk about African history from the point of view of history. You have to know about ecology, know about the land, because humans respond to the environment in particular ways. Where there's a lot of grazing and the soils are too poor to grow food crops, the people will become herders. They would keep sheep, cattle, goats, camels, depending on the environment and the review. And where the land is fertile enough and blessed with water and the rest of it and rainfall, they would become more agriculturalist, sedentarist farmers. So you had to look at the environment, like as you said before, geography being the mother of history. You have to look at your environment. And also a lot of the books that I was about to show you, the sun's coming through, it's going to be hard to look at the shelf. The books that I bought from him, we used to collect them. In those days, books were very expensive and very hard to come by. Sometimes if we had friends, Trinidad had a good relationship with New York. Our expat community used to be back and forth. We'd get books from a bookshop in Harlem called Liberation Bookstore in Harlem. I think it's closed down now. And then we established our own bookstores like that, where they import. No sooner than these books had come, then they would disappear off the shelves. And you used to go around to a person's house and camp out and say, I won't leave until you give me back the book I lent you.
Man,
and that's how we treated books back then. So from a very early age, all over the shelf is just crazy, man. All over the table, there are books about.
Danjuma, I'm pretty much the same. My father is an avid book collector, book reader. He used to take my sister and I to bookstores every weekend. And that's something, as I grew up, it carried over. And I go to the bookstore until, lockdown. I used to go to the bookstore every Friday. Back at home, when I got paid, I'd be in the used bookstore and stuff like that. And around my house, I have to find places to hide my books. Otherwise, they would overtake everything else. But yeah, I find that a lot of people have sentiments about books like that, especially Muslims. Unfortunately, it seems like books are going back to being very expensive, especially if you try to get them on hardcover. No, I can't hear you. Okay. No, no. Okay. Oh, I can't hear you. Okay. No, no.
You still can't hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm having a technical problem. Bear with me one brief second.
Oh, no worries.
Let me see if I can do one. Let me see. I think the headphone needs charging. This is the most awkward situation. Hmm. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, it's gone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you can't
I
hear
can't hear you now. Something. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Something's gone awry. We'll have to keep. Okay, you have to edit this somehow.
No,
Yeah.
it's all right. We just roll with the punches and keep
Yeah.
going. I think it's been good so far. So
Yeah.
So what brought you to Africa?
Oh, yes, I was a member of I joined this group. I met this sheikh in the street, and he was wearing the Sudanese style clothing. And I'd asked him about it. And he told me that he was a member of the Ansarullah community. And I joined them. And then there were things in the community that I began to question. And some of their pseudoscience. They went into some weird, it was a forerunner of this now Nuwabian thing that he was trying out on the community.
Okay.
And so he claimed, what caught my attention most was that he claimed to have been the great grandson of the Sudanese Mahdi.
Yeah.
I went to the Sudan to check this for myself, remembering the words of the Ethiopian priest Abba Gabriel Selassie. The sun has changed its position. Hold on. Yeah.
It's same thing with here. I'm gonna have to turn the lights.
Let me see if I can do this. I'll have to. Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, it's the sun that coming. If I close it, it'll become dark. Yeah. Can you see me at all?
Yes, I can. You're perfect.
All right. Yeah. So, I used to attend this Ethiopian Orthodox church when I was hobnobbing with the Rastafari movement. And the Ethiopian priest did say this to me when I told him about Islam, and I told him about this guy who's he's Sudanese, he's the great grandson of the Sudanese Mahdi. And then he gave me the proverb to lie about a far country is easy. So I said, well, let me go to this far country to find out for myself. And I went to the Sudan and I met the Mahdi family. In fact, I am up to this day very close friends with the Sudanese Mahdi family. And they said to me, well, to tell you the honest truth, he's not related to us at all. And that changed my perspective on a lot of things. And in a sense, I never left Africa. I came back, went to the UK, finished some studies, and I went back to West Africa. So I traveled a bit in East Africa then. The Sudan was the first place I went to in Africa. And then I went to the western part of Africa.
When you were studying in the UK, did you study at SOAS?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
I remember you were mentioning something that you were either a pupil with or a student of
Humphrey Fisher.
Huh?
Humphrey Fisher?
Is that the guy who wrote Sokoto Caliphate?
Sokoto Caliphate. Which? Oh, you mean Ibrahim Suleiman? The African Caliphate, yeah?
No. It's called the Sokoto Caliphate. It was written. It might have been his last name Warner, maybe. I showed you the book cover, and you said that you knew the guy because you either went to school with him or he was.
Oh, you mean Muhammad Sharif?
No,
Muhammad Sharif.
No, not Muhammad Sharif. It's off the live stream. I'll send you what the book looks like. It's called the Sokoto Caliphate. It's green, and I believe it has like a coin on it.
Not John Hanwick.
I don't think so. His last name might have started with the W.
can't remember. I do know that I did study with Ibrahim Suleiman, who wrote The African Caliphate, the life, works, and yeah, I'm looking at it on my shelf while I'm talking to you. That's why I can see it on my shelf.
No, but this one's older. This is definitely older. And when I bought it, it cost quite a pretty penny even then.
Osman Bugaji.
No,
Is it?
no.
Yes, it's Osman Bugaji.
It might. I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think it's by. I'm trying to look on the shelf while I'm talking to you. I have it somewhere on the shelf. You mean the Sakwato model? Not this?
No,
oh, the light.
No, not. I kind of seen it when you flashed it. No, it's not that. I wish I could think of it. I should have thought of the author's name before I did this.
I'm looking on the shelf while you're talking to me, trying to figure out which book it is.
You must have a lot of books on the Sokoto Collapse.
I got a couple of books here. I mean, but the thing is, yeah, I mean, it's at SOAS you meet a lot of interesting people from all over the world. Now I can't even think of the amount of people I've met. I was there with Kwame Nkrumah's son and daughter. I studied together with both Kwame Nkrumah's son and his daughter. So, and they were good friends of mine. In fact, they're still friends.
Didn't you mention something about?
Yes, Zainab Badi was doing a PhD when I was doing my first degree.
Okay.
She did her first degree at Oxford. And Zainab is indirectly related to the Mahdi family as well. Zainab is one of those Omdurman families, the Badaris, the Badris, the Helus, the Mahdis, the Kintibai Abu Garjas. They're all marrying to each other. They were all part of the Mahdi movement.
Okay, wow.
The Mahdist movement. Yeah, all those families. So in some way, Zainab is related to the Mahdi as well.
It seems like SOAS was a real popping place back then.
Back then, the only thing I didn't like about SOAS back then, they were reluctant to admit more blacks born here. It happened. We had to push for that. They seem to like foreign Africans, foreign blacks, African Americans, as long as they're paying the overseas fees rates.
Yeah, I was going to try to get into SOAS once I finished my transfer degree, but I ended up staying here when I came to visit. So that's another story.
But I studied under people like Humphrey Fisher. Humphrey Fisher was the person who first, his father and he were the people who propounded an alternative theory to the Almoravid destruction of ancient Ghana, Wagadu, in 1076. They said it was less. They said if you go back over the notes, looking through Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Khaldun just lifted it from al-Bakri, and al-Bakri himself had no eyewitness basis to say that ancient Ghana was overwhelmed, militarily by the Almoravids and sacked and destroyed. It never happened that way. So
that's when you say that history is just a set of lies agreed upon.
Agreed upon, yeah. So it was Professor Humphrey Fisher who actually said to me, let us go through the Arabic sources with a fine-tooth comb, and you will not find anywhere where al-Bakri or anybody can substantiate that the Almoravitun, the Almoravids, destroyed ancient Ghana. There's no record of that ever happening at all. In fact, what a lot of Afrocentrists don't like to accept is that ancient Ghana, the leadership, the top echelons, were already in the process of Islamizing. A lot of their leaders, apparently the leaders of the ancient Ghana, unlike its successor Mali, were Soninke, or what's in Wolof they call Serahule. Now those people were just about, they were on the cusp of Islamizing when Mali rose and incorporated Ghana into the Mali Empire. So it's not the story of these Arabs as people, as the Afrocentrists would, they wouldn't even look at the Almoravids as what they were. They were Berber or Amazigh.
Yeah.
The Arabs had not arrived in Mauritania till the 16th and 17th, and between the 15th and the 17th century, it's when the Arabs arrived in Mauritania. Prior to that, what you hear about the Almorabitun, they are Berbers. If people don't like the name, I can say Amazigh.
Yeah.
They were not Arabs at all.
Were there any Senegalese with the Almoravids, being that the empire stretched all the way to the Senegalese River?
If there was any group of people that should accept culpability for the destruction of Ghana, and I'm not saying there was a destruction of Ghana, it would be the people to Ghana's west, the Empire of Takrur. The Empire of Takrur were black Africans on both banks of the Senegal River, but mostly on the south bank of the Senegal River. And they were made up, I think the common language of the empire was a kind of Fulani called Pular. A western form of Fulani called Pular. But the people were much, much darker in color than the Fulani. And today, their descendants are called, I think, Futanke or Tukulor. They call them Tukulor, and they live in a part of Senegal, the northern part of Senegal, called Futatoro. And they are distinguished from other Fulani by their surnames, whereas a lot of the prototypical Fulani surnames are four: Ka, Ba, So, and Diallo. They would have names like Kan, Wan, Fal, Mal, Bal, Tal, Sal. They have names that you can tell these are Fulani, but they're different from the Futa Diallo, from the other the red-skinned Fulani with the cows. Because in Tekrur, they had settled down quite quickly and become a sedentary society. It became a kingdom. So if they did keep cows still, maybe they would have done what the Tutsi of Rwanda do today. The Tutsi of Rwanda established the kingdom of Urundi in Burundi, the kingdom of Nkore in Uganda, the kingdom of Karagwe in Tanzania, and the kingdom of Rwanda in Rwanda. And while they settled down, they hired people, tributaries and vassals, to look after their cows. So they were still a pastoral society, but they were also a settled kingdom at the same time. And I suspect the same thing must have obtained in Tekrur. Tekrur was a settled society. They had a lot of cavalry and military, and a lot of them actually performed the shock troops of the Almoravids when Yusuf Tashfin invaded Spain.
Spain, I heard that. I read that. By Al Marakushi, an account from him. He had mentioned Yusuf Tashfin using having black Africans.
Yes, and it is to that extent, I think, is when the word blackamoor enters the European parlance. I don't hold with the wishful thinking that from the get-go in 711, Tariq bin Ziyad was a black African, and all the Moors at that time were black Africans. In 711, when they invaded Spain, I don't believe the Moors were, I'm putting inverted commas, I don't believe the majority were Negroes or sub-Saharan Africans. I don't believe that.
Opinion, even though Afrocentrists would disagree. A lot of them
would and they want to have it both ways. They would like them to be black because they're civilizing Europe. But when they're Muslims, they want them to be Arabs.
Exactly, yeah.
Because they don't want the Islam part, but they want so. And you see, history isn't in neat. Humans don't live in neat categories and packages like that. We don't live like that. You know, I have a grandmother who came from South India, but who came from a Jewish background. Her surname was Samuel. This the first time you're hearing it hot off the press. It's the first time you're ever saying this in public. Wow, my father's mother, who came to Trinidad on the last boat from India in 1917, was called Mariam Samuel. Wow. And she comes from a Jewish community where there is still a mosque, synagogue in Ernakulam in Kerala. They're still there.
I never thought that there was a Jewish community in South.
Yes, most of them are in some part of Israel today. They went Aliyah. They took them there, which had brought me to a subject I wanted to discuss. So I only put that in to tell you that people are more mixed than you think they are, and history is less conveniently packaged than the way we want to present it.
The way we want it to be. We
a lot. But that doesn't mean I am any more lenient on the Black Israelite Hebrew community. I'm not any more tolerant of them because of that. I think that the Black Hebrew Israelite community is, whether they know it or not, indulging in a distraction that is going to be bad for the African diasporan community. Because what they're doing is, in subtle ways, even though they protest vehemently that they are against the state of Israel as it exists today, and I know that is true, they are. At the same time, I cannot in all good conscience endorse a literalist understanding of the book of Joshua and Deuteronomy, where it actually it invites ethnocide. It invites genocide. And if you're telling me that black people did that, well, I don't want to be a part of those black people.
Yeah.
If God chose me to go and wipe out other people because somebody saw his grandfather naked or something like that, an entire race of people go to wipe them out because somebody saw his grandfather naked, then I'm afraid that that's reading history too literally. Now, let me caveat what I'm saying, because I know this will become misunderstood almost immediately. You know, we say that, I'm trying to get the light away. I might have to close the windows. Are you seeing me at all? I mean,
Yeah,
is the light?
you're good.
Yeah. You know, we live in a cancel culture, and people are always looking for an itch to scratch. So they're always trying to find the worst in what you're saying. Now, I am not saying that people were not chosen, but they were chosen to do things in the right way. And if the Bible, as it explains how the land was taken, is what God, I don't believe God endorsed that method of taking or occupying that land. It set a dangerous precedent. It not only set a precedent for 1948, as we know what, it also set a precedent prior to that for imperialism. We are now New Israel, we Catholics, we the Orthodox are New Israel, we the Protestants are New Israel, and it is our manifest destiny to go and take other people's land.
Yeah.
You see? And if you're going to tell me that, no, the original people who did that, who came up with it are black people, no, no, I'm not saying it because that is the reason, but I do not believe, personally, I don't believe that account in the Bible. What I believe is this, and I think I explained this somewhere before. People who speak Semitic languages indulge in a lot of hyperbole. They say things in a way. For example, I was teaching this boy in Jeddah. His father is Palestinian, and his results were poor. And I know that his father was really upset. And his father wrote a note saying to me, I rather he had hanged himself than bring these notes. And of course, if I had decided to take it upon myself to give the boy a piece of rope to hang himself, and then he did that, the father wouldn't be best pleased. But it's a way of speaking, an exaggerated way of expressing how strongly you feel about something. Yeah. I think that the Israelites, Bani Israel, were trying to put the other people on notice that there's a new bad boy in town. That's how I see it. They wrote that saying, look at what our God told us to. Cut down every fruit tree, poison every well, take all the virgins, kill all the men. You know, I don't believe that we are meant to take that literally.
No.
I believe that's how Semites speak. Arabs speak like that. Hebrew, Aramaic, Amharic, all those Semitic languages have that degree of hyperbole, that degree of exaggeration. You know, look at Saddam Hussein when he, maybe you're too young to remember the Gulf War, when he said, this is al-Ma'arik, this is going to be the mother of battles. That kind of language, al-Ma'arik, the mother of battles. It's a way they talk. And I don't think it's meant to be taken literally. The problem is, as you know, the hadith says, the pens have been lifted and the ink on the pages has dried. Our problem is we read these things absolutely word for word literally. So if I am a Jew like Rabbi Meir Kahane, the great expansionist, who believed that according to the book of Joshua, the land that God promised the chosen people, it starts from Bahr al-Nil ila al-Furat, from the banks of the Nile to the banks of the Euphrates, then we know that the Zionist project is far from over. It's far from over because they want a good slice of Egypt and a good slice of Iraq.
Yeah, and they don't have
They're far from done. Now, that's what comes from literalist readings. I believe the Quran does, this is me, the Quran does not take the Bible literally. It takes the moral lessons that the Bible had sought to teach. Yeah. It references, it doesn't say, right, you see, it says chosen people, so then everything about Allah killing it said in the Bible is true.
Yeah.
You see, now, I know there are Muslims who are hoist on their own petard because they believe that.
Yeah.
And then, as well, if you do believe that, then you've just done yourself out of a piece of land. Then the Palestinians have no claim because we are not talking, remember how the Bible is written. the Bible is not written to include all of Abraham's descendants. It sounds like it, but it goes back on itself almost immediately. It starts by saying, all of Abraham. First of all, you notice that Keturah's children are not mentioned.
No,
The children of the third one, they're not even mentioned, right?
Not at all.
But then it goes on to say, take thy son, and it underlines it, thy only son. It's Yitzhak, Isaac, your only, right? And it gives it, and not only does it give it to him, the guy has a twin brother, the guy's wife gives birth to twins.
Yeah.
And the one who was supposed to be owning the covenant, he gets bumped by stealth and trickery.
Yeah.
So the Bible actually suspends morality in order to advance the interests of Jacob's progeny. Because remember when he went to get the blessing, he pretended to be his brother because his dad was blind at the time.
Yeah.
Now, I personally don't, this is me, I don't believe any of this. But I believe it's their way of saying, we are the chosen of the chosen. As humans evolved, we are the most chosen people. And you see, this concept of Uber Alice bothers me. This Shabil al-Mukhtar, this chosen people thing, I find it very, very worrying.
Yeah, I find it very worrying as well. But
because you start. Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You start with no. I just wanted to get to this because I have a lot of people on Facebook that have got into my DMs telling me things like, why are black Muslims so exercised about these racist Arabs who hate black people, and now we're all crying for Palestine? And I had to say, and then you had another group of black people who are actually some of my family who are evangelicals. My mother's side of the family are evangelical. I have a goodish number of evangelical Christians. And they were saying, no. God has gifted this land to Benjamin Netanyahu and his ilk. God gave it to him. He's the true one. These are the true people. So you have to deal with all these kind of people. And one of my answers to my black friends was, look, you have to understand that the scale of Palestine, Al-Quds, in the minds of the Ummah is not the same as the Rohingya or the Uyghur. It's not the same. While these are regional, and I understand that we should not draw a veil over that problem. At the same time, you have to understand the gravitational pull of Al-Quds in that respect. And then the other thing they do, I said, for you to sit here and compare the plight of the Palestinians to Arab racism is also disingenuous. I said, look, I'm not saying this because I've been to Palestine and I have never received a quarter of the racism from lighter skinned Palestinians who are lighter skinned than Egyptians. I lived for a year in Egypt and every day in the street was some kind of joke against black people. This is in Egypt where the people are slightly lighter than me. But every day in the street, there's a joke about black people.
I've heard this from a black lady who was studying in Egypt and she said she had a really hard time.
Dude, you're going this worse yet. You go with some South Sudanese, the blue black people, and they give those people a hard time. So when my brothers from Sudan tell me we don't want anything to do with Islam, it's not just there. People brown like you, brother Danjuma, like you in Sudan, treat us like this. I understand, and that's why I tell people sometimes do not mistake the flowers for the vase. Don't. Right? For South Sudanese, a jalabiya, the white clothes and the turban, is a symbol of a slaver. He's a slave trader. So even though for a Trinidadian, it was liberating, the suit and the tie and the bowler hat or whatever you wear with your tie or your spats or whatever, that was the symbol of the colonial mentality. So we went for the white gown and the turban. But in the Sudan, South Sudan, that is a symbol of oppression.
Yeah. Wow.
So people have got to understand, don't confuse the vase and the flowers, right? I wouldn't go to South Sudan and wear jalabiya. That's a standing provocation. Yeah. That reminds them of the people who used to come at night and carry out their children from the villages.
Yeah. So they associated jalabiya with
yes.
traitor.
In fact, the word jalaba, they said the word jalabiya because that's properly a thobe, a garment, but they call it jalabiya. They say jalabiya comes from the verb jalaba, to trade, but the verb jalaba, to trade, has come to mean to trade in slaves.
Trade in slaves, wow.
Yeah, So, you know, people have to be, when we talk about Africa, it's not a monolith. We don't go to with this one size fits all attitude to Africa. There are parts of Africa I will not go and give dawah. It would be insulting to the people. They need to take a breather from what has been mischaracterized as al-Islam for them to find their peace with history. It's like these people going to these Papuans of New Guinea and telling them to wear thobes. And it's sort of ridiculous. Now, these people are being oppressed by Indonesian Muslims in West Papua, and you're going there and talking. Brother, we have to approach things at understanding the fitra of people. There's a lot of Islam in people, in their humanity. And if you do things like this, it will be counterproductive. It's not every people you can go to and sell them a thobe and a hutra, a tea towel and a thobe, and tell them that's Islam. That happened to us because we lost people. We lost. So we think that the more we try to speak in some stilted schoolboy Arabic with a short thobe and a long beard, we're being more Muslim. We buy dates for iftar, even if it comes from Israel, because it's dates, and it must be better than mangoes and peaches. It must be better because it's this kind. People don't understand. It's the same problem I have with the Hebrew Israelites. It's the same kind of problem, which is that even though I know they don't want to be Saudi, but they're creating an environment where they are kindly disposed to people who are oppressors and racists. Yeah. They're creating an environment to facilitate them. And you may draw the distinction between being a Salafi and a Saudi, but your children may not. They will just go there. And look, the problem is when the Gulf Arabs, the GCC, apart from Oman, the rest of the Gulf Arabs are very much enthralled to America and its works. They love Europeans. They have a hierarchy of preferment. I work this. I can tell you this. They have the European passports of who is more deserving and who is less deserving. Yeah. You see, so in a place like Dubai, they will see a Lithuanian or a Ukrainian as a prostitute. That passport doesn't carry the same amount of credibility as an American passport or a German passport. You see, so that's what I was trying to tell my people when they start saying you mustn't support the Palestinians because they hate black people. I said, no, that's like telling me an Englishman with his British colonial history is the same as somebody from Belarus. They're both white people, but their history and relationship to us is different. Now, I understand a Belarusian or a Polish person can become white supremacized. I'm inventing a verb here.
By living in the United States. Where they came to the United States, they weren't considered white, and just within a couple of generations, they were.
Exactly. That can happen. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they're not going to bask in the reflected glory of white supremacy. But by and large, you go to Moldova, those people are living on £1 a day. They're eating organic. If they're healthy, they're looking fine, it's because they're drinking cow's milk from the cows. They're eating potatoes from the ground. They're rural agricultural people. And most of the African countries have a GDP higher than Moldova. So, we have to really, I'm not saying give anybody a pass. What I am saying is this one size fits all hatred, I think is counterproductive. I think so. Eastern European... Brother, in fact, Eastern Europeans can turn and tell us, but who are you to talk? You are Muslim. You Ottomans colonized us for 150 years. Who are you to talk? You see? Or, let me be really perverse. The Spanish could say it. The Spanish could say, 700 years in Spain? And we're talking. So, I'm not saying, I'm being a bit mischievous here, but I'm saying that I would like people, even from the basis of pure humanity. What I can't get about the Zionists is this. The Bible tells them, when you go into that land I shall give unto you, treat kindly with the people, for you were a slave in the land of Egypt. You see Ben Gurion, Yitzhak Shamir, Menachem Begin, Golda Meir, what's the other criminal? Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu. You see them reflecting that? You see them, they're not reflecting that?
Not at all.
So my only problem with the situation is, let's go to the ridiculous extreme. Let's say we have to remove all the Ashkenazi. What do we do with the Sephardim, the Mizrahim? What do we do with the Yemenite Jew? the Indian Jew, the Baghdadi Jew, the Cairo, the Egyptian Jew, the Moroccan Jew. Where do we send them? I'm not saying, listen, before people clip this, I said that. I'm not saying chase anybody out of the land. These Israelis have cleverly created facts on the ground. I saw it when I was there. They were edging their apartment buildings more and more into occupied territory, and they were doing marriages between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. So now when you look at a child, it's like when Enoch Powell said, send the Caribbeans back home. We used to joke. We said, but one parent is from Barbados and one is from Guyana. We're going to send the child. We're going to send me. You know, similarly, when a child in they call them sabra in Hebrew, which is the cactus fruit, the prickly pear, which is to say it's prickly on the outside, but when you get to know it inside, it's sweet. It is how they describe themselves. Now, if you take a child born in Israel, there's of both ethnicities, the Eastern Jew and the Western Jew, the Polish Jew and the Yemenite Jew. And I've met them. Look, I've been there speaking to Yemeni girls, because those girls are pretty girls and they make you want to speak to them. So I'm at Ein Gedi, the big waterfall, and I'm seeing them there at the waterfall, and I sidle up to them because I hear them whispering, speak easy to each other in Arabic. They don't speak Arabic loudly for the other Jews to hear. So I start speaking them in Arabic and they could die of embarrassment because, man, you out, dude, what you doing? Then Arabic is because they don't want to be confused for being a Palestinian Arab or an Arab, because they don't want their loyalties questioned. And for a long time, Arab Jews' loyalty was questioned to the extent we look at the chief rabbi, Ovadia Yusuf. People overcompensate when they're under that kind of pressure. He was the one who promulgated an edict saying that Ethiopian Jews upon arrival should take a ritual recircumcision to prove that they're Jews.
Wow.
He was a Middle Eastern Jew, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. So what you often get is the people that you would supposed to share a closer affinity to are sometimes more strident because they're trying to overcome and prove.
They're trying to put on to show that, hey, I'm just as much as how you guys are against these people. So.
But I believe from a basic human point of view, we should support Palestine. Forget about being Muslim. But, you know, and I'll tell you another thing again. People like Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, people like Malcolm X, brothers like that, these guys had strong links with the PLO, with the Algerian Revolutionary Council. They had strong links with these people from the point of view of what was called back then Third World Solidarity. You see? So I understand what Afrocentrism is doing. I do understand. Don't let me leave this platform misunderstood. I don't want to say I understand when Afrocentrists say, because the Kurds say, the moment a Kurdish child is born after the Shahadatain, you know what they teach a Kurdish child in his ear? A Kurd has no friends. I understand that. I know, because I know that within the whole hierarchy of racial values, we're at the bottom. I know this. I've been among Seminole communities where they look at me strange. Now, that didn't make me hate Seminoles. I know what they've been through. They're shell-shocked. These people, look, a lot of the time, you take a Quechua community in Peru or Bolivia, the Aymara of Bolivia, or the Guarani in Paraguay. If they see a black Latino speaking only Spanish, they see you as part of the white establishment. Try to understand. You're a black Brazilian, a caboclo or something, and you're going into Amazonia and behaving just like the white Brazilian. Of course, they see you as part of the problem. Now, a lot of us want to think, well, yeah, they got black Ecuadorians, we have black people from Peru, and why is it that we don't hear about them? We hear more about the first people struggle. I said, well, you would, because for crying out loud, that's their land. I don't want to put it more crassly than that. It's their land. And, you know, there are differences between them and us because we are creolized. We've been made slaves and turned into black white men. So we see things the way the hacendero, the white landowner, Latino white landowner sees things. We see things like them. We were created by them, like Muhammad Ali Clay. We were created by these people. So we need to get out of that mindset and not say that we should accept anti-blackness from everybody, but try to understand that it comes in different permutations. It comes in, and one last thing on this subject I'd like to say, and this is not really whataboutery. This is me saying When Black people talk, and we do, about how everybody's oppressed us, I want us to pay special attention to the fate of the shorter peoples of Africa. I'm going to use the word like this: the pygmies, and what they used to pejoratively refer to as the pygmies, and the Bushmen. The Bushmen, which are the Khoi of the Kalahari, the Khoisan of the Kalahari. They are in Botswana today, and part of Namibia, and part of South Africa. And then you have the so-called pygmy in Eastern Congo, and you have the Baka in the Cameroon. We tall people, it wasn't no white people, no Arab, it's us. We, the taller Africans, wipe them out. It is known in history that the Romans encountered them on an expedition that misfired, and the Romans ended up as far as the Niger River. They encountered, watch my fingers, inverted commas, the pygmies that far north.
Wow.
So those short people were more in number, the demographic had a wider sweep, and it is our people, especially the Bantu explosion out of southeastern part of West Africa, out of the Cameroon area, across to the Congo, Tanzania, down as far as, well, you know, the Xhosa and the Zulu. Yeah, exactly. We are the ones, you know, not just Bantus. A lot of the people who must have wiped them out were Kushites too. There was a pre-Bantu Cushitic expansion even before the Bantus into East Africa.
The Bantu expansion kind of wiped out some of these, because every time I hear something about Bantus in other countries, they're the ones who are oppressed, such as like in Somalia.
It's true. It is true, because I think they were brought in there. Some of them were brought by Omani or Waswahili slave traders, but a lot were brought by Italians and Portuguese.
But early on, they were the ones kind of pushing people out, taking over.
Well, to go back that far with Somalia, I think the archaeology is still in its infancy. They're still discovering there was a time it was greener, hence the caves that show cattle. The caves don't show camels, they show cattle. So the cattle complex, it goes as far north as Egypt and as far south as the Zulu in South Africa. That area must have been greener at a time when the land could support cattle. Now it supports, like in the northern part of Kenya, the Turkana and the Rendille also switched to camels because the land, so it's not just the Somalis who switched to camels, the Rendille and the Turkana have also switched to camel husbandry because the land became dry. That's why I tell people, study geography, study animal husbandry, get interested in animals and plants, flora and fauna, because we have to find ways of growing crops that once grew there, that sustained us, and that are more attuned to the environment. We are now eating a lot of introduced cash crops that giving us diabetes and all the rest of it. I'm guilty of it. I do it, and we have to retrain ourselves and start back growing things that once grew there. That's why you may find this very counter narrative, but I'm a member of Kew Gardens, and I spend a lot of time in there where they keep the seeds and all these things, because there's a lot of GM going on in the world today. They've commandeered the whole idea of seed imperialism.
Yeah.
And we have to we have to break that mentality. And then I have discussions with them at Q saying, look, there are colonial aspects to Q you can keep if you want to be proud of being British. Here's me. I don't believe in throwing out baby in bathwater. I believe you should allow people to be proud of what is good in their culture. You can't just make people hate because you're going to get a backlash like Nigel Farage. That was a backlash about telling English people to hate everything about being English. And what you're going to get is an idiot like that's going to come up and make the case more extreme than it is. What I think we need to do is like our people, they taught us to hate everything about ourselves. That is our problem. We were taught everything about ourselves. Now, so I understand why the Afrocentrists try to find an excuse for everything dysfunctional they find in African culture. They find an excuse to style it out. I understand why they're doing it, because for too long, we were told everything about Africa is negative. A simple thing like an embassy takeover in Trinidad. There was a problem between the Argentinian embassy and the Nigerian embassy. A squabble erupted, and our local newspapers automatically took the side of the Argentinians because they were fairer skinned. It wasn't anything deeper than that. And then when the Falklands War took place, because we were an ex-British colony, we automatically took the side of England. So in descending order of light-skinnedness, we kept going. And that's one of our problems. We are the obverse to that is we are quick to condemn everything that's our own. I'm saying that you might hear me talk, people misunderstand me and they want to put me as a racist pretending to be a Muslim. They can say that all they want. I tell them, no, I think it's time for Black people to be proud of what is good in their culture.
Of course.
I'm not proud of drinking rum. I'm not proud of it. But I am proud of many other things in Trinidad culture.
Yeah.
And there are many things in Yoruba culture of which I'm not proud, but there are many more things of which I am proud. And we have to be able to make that distinction and become more comfortable with ourselves. And that's why I often say, you're going to Papua New Guinea and telling the people to wear thobes. That's a disservice. Let them make their own peace with their understanding of Al-Islam. Yes. You're giving them Islam.
Because now that's what you see in the Black communities, a pushback against what we consider Arabism, Arabizing converts. And it went on, from what I understand, for a considerable amount of time. And then now you kind of see a pushback of, okay, well, we want to keep the good things in our, for African Americans, we want to celebrate Thanksgiving. You got
your bean pies, man. Yeah. What's wrong with a bean pie? I'd like one right now. You see, but people are going to have to tell you, oh, that's Nation of Islam. It's there, therefore it's Jahiliyyah.
Yeah, you can't.
How can the food be Jahiliyyah, man? Oh, get real.
Some Muslims are even adverse with Muslims even linking up with the Nation of Islam for common cause. To go out and do things that there's overlap. Like, okay, we both stay as a Muslim community. And Nation of Islam people stay in the Muslim community together. We both have common problems. Let's try to work together to solve that. I've heard of other Muslims, non-Black Muslims, having a problem with that happening because they are not Muslims, and that you shouldn't join ties with not Muslims to solve those type of problems.
Wallahi, I wager if one of them had spent one day under apartheid in South Africa, they would have done what Ahmad Kathrada did and joined the ANC. They would have done it because he got the Muslims to throw their lot in with so-called kuffar. And it worked, right? Because we have, like you rightly said, you've said it, I don't have to repeat it. You've said it, that when people's problems dovetail, when they share common problems, right? They're working towards the eradication of that common problem. It doesn't mean that I'm going to start saying Elijah Muhammad is a prophet and that Father Muhammad is God. I'm not going to do that. And they know me well enough to know this is where we part company, but we part company amicably. Who am I to tell them when my own mother's an evangelical Christian? I can't convert my own mother. I'm going to start hating the Nation of Islam. Why would I do that? And this Shia thing, let me just say one thing about that. People don't understand. I'm old enough to remember when the Ayatollah Khomeini came to power in 1979, and the Americans went to the Saudis and told them, wait a minute. You know how dangerous these Shia are? And they began telling the Arabs their religion, right? Telling them, well, you are the true way, you are the Sunni, and these are the Shia. And drive out just in order to build up Saudi Arabia and to put Iran in its place, because Iran was the only Muslim country that was saying, America, you are the great Satan. You are the Satan. There's no other
about Salafism in America, and that's the time when a lot of Saudi literature, Islamic literature from Saudi started being flooded into the West, specifically the United States. And
I saw the development myself. I saw it even on Speaker's Corner in the 90s. I know when they came and Brother Khaja, who died recently, Allah yarhamu, he stayed, and his sons. I left. I said, you know why? It's going to be a bloodbath in Speaker's Corner, and Kuffar are going to be saying, this is Islam? This is Islam? I saw a brother, a Salafi brother from the same country as Brother Khaja, stand up, and I'm talking, this is a giant of a guy, about 6'5". Huh? He was an ex-boxer. I wouldn't call his name because I don't want to be that mischievous. I want to, but I won't. I'm too old for that. You don't have to say, I'm an older dude now. I got to set a good example. I can't be outing people and calling names like some little child. I'm a fully grown man now. Although I have a very childish streak, and I'm sure you know that. Right? But I will resist. This large man, 6'5", stands at the back of the crowd, pointing over the heads of the people wrapped enthralled, listening to Brother Khaja and saying, don't listen to him. He is a purveyor of bid'ah. He's a bid'ah merchant. And he said, so I went up to the brother and said, Brother O, I'm not going to call his name. I said, Brother O, could you the guy's arm is as big as me. He was an ex-boxer. The guy just shoved me aside. He knew what he did. He shoved me aside. And I'm thinking, now if I get into it with him, we have non-Muslims who've come here listening to Brother Khaja. We can't do this. So at the end of the end, I'm telling you this, not because the brother is dead and he can't corroborate what I'm saying, but Brother Khaja and I, we prayed Asr. Other people prayed, and then Brother Khaja said, Brother Juma, I'm going to have to wrap this up because I don't want to have to kill a man. I don't want, put it in how we talk. I don't want to kill a man, you know. I don't have to kill her. I said, Brother Khaja, you have said what I wanted to say. Because Brother Khaja had a rep too. Back in the 70s, he had a rep before he was a Muslim. And that brother, if he knew the reputation of Brother Khaja before he took Shahada, he wouldn't mess with him like that. You know, he's 2 times the size of him, but Brother Khaja was an ex-boxer too, right? Okay. But so I said to Brother Khaja, actually, I've been thinking the same. You know, I don't have your boxing skills. And that guy, I think he got a little physical. He got a little too physical. And I'm going to have to stop coming here. And let me tell you what was happening at the time. We had a good relationship with the Afrocentrists. They came and they were like beating down on Islam. When we came, we said to them, no. You may think we're not brothers, but I'm going to call you a brother till you learn to like it, and I'll show you why. Because if you try to claim Mali, Timbuktu, and Guinea, if you try to claim Harar, if you try to claim any Lalibala, any African civilization, I will show you where the outside influences are there, but it's still African. So something doesn't have to be just undiluted African for it to be African, because no culture and civilization is like that. But they wanted to pretend that Timbuktu had nothing to do with Islam. And I said, that's you can't revise history like that. You can't do that. So we had a good relationship with them until the Salafis turned up.
But it seems like you still have a good relationship with, still good rapport with the Afrocentrists that come down to Speaker's Corner.
No, I don't, because I recently went back. I had stopped going. Brother Khaja remained. He used to go in all weathers. God bless that brother. He used to go. And, you know, after a while, people began to think, you know, it coincided too with the Gulf War, the invasion of Kuwait, then the invasion of Iraq. And then Islam began to shift on its axis to a more Arabo-centric. So even if it wasn't Salafist, it was jihadist.
Yeah.
And then the young Asians in this country who used to be under pressure and a little less confident about owning their space actually did a kind of reflected glory, did get a lot of inspiration from those jihadi movements. They did. That's why you get some of the crazy stuff up to recently, the guy who was supposed to be in rehab and stabbed the people that he was going to a meeting with. You get that in the Asian community, because I know about the days. I just arrived, but there were days in this country when a parent would be taking home his money bag after a hard day's work with his 2 sons, and a bunch of white racists come around the corner and say, let's do some packy bashing. Excuse the language. I'm using the language in inverted commas. Let's do some pee bashing. And the guy would have to give his children the money. Dodge, get through, go home and take the beating. These children grew up seeing their parents beaten up by white racists like that. So I understand that kind of, that jihadi, the attraction the Bin Laden era had for a lot of people. I know what it comes from. I'm not saying like, understand is not to excuse, it's to understand. What we're doing here, we have to look for the nuance. We have to look for reasons why things went the way they went. I know when Asians started being discriminated against by Hindus and Sikhs during the Rushdie era in 1987, when the book, The Satanic Verses, it's on my shelf actually, if I could find it, I bought a copy because I saw people stamping on the book in Pakistan, and I want to know, did they read Salman Rushdie's book? And many of them did not, but the ones in England did read the book. And yes, the book has a lot of really, really negative references to the Prophet and his wives. May Allah be pleased with them all. And therefore, the Hindus, at that time, everybody was just Asian. They were just Asian. You'd have the Mega Mela and everybody would go together and all the rest, just like in Trinidad. But when the Satanic Verses came out, there was a leader, I believe he was of Shia background, called Kaleem Siddiqui. He was the person who said, yes, I endorse what the fatwa, the Iranian fatwa against Salman Rushdie. He was an Asian, but I believe Shia. And what it did, a lot of Muslims of Asian origin rallied around, said, actually, this is the kind of spine we're looking for. And of course, the Sikhs and the Hindus pulled away, saying, this is not the British way. Yeah. It's not the British way. This is not the Priti Patel British way. All right? You know what I'm talking about. I got Hindu family. I shouldn't be talking like this. Right? But I'm telling you the truth. I know that tendency of pointing at a part of your community and calling them the bad guy. Yeah. And for the Hindus and the Sikhs, the Muslims were it. And that caused the Muslims, the younger generation growing up of Asian Muslims, to start finding their feet in a kind of Middle Eastern idiom. That's what happened. And then there was the Bosnian War, the Kosovo War, and the Chechen War in the mid-90s. Yeah, and all of which was like right on Europe's doorstep, and all the rest of it. So we have to understand, when we look at these developments, like, why are the young Asians so a bit jihadi and a bit Arabo-centric, whereas their parents are a bit more kind of old-style racist and pro-Asian? There's a generational divide between them. And the Salman Rushdie affair, and the Bosnian War fed into that difference. Even the differences in the Asian community, when I just arrived, between Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim, wasn't that big. It wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
It wasn't a big deal. It became, perhaps they were waiting for an excuse to make it a thing. I don't know. And the Salman Rushdie gave that impetus to the parting of the ways. Yeah. But I'm trying to look at all these communities, because what I'm trying to say here, Brother Turum, is that all of us as Muslims are part of a whole, and all of us as people in the global South are part of a whole. Yeah. So I'm putting us as Black people in the context of all of them, as part of you can't talk about Islam in this country without talking about Asians. They're the overwhelming majority, like the Turks in Germany and the North Africans in France. You can't just we can't have a discussion about it without mentioning them. At the same time, I know we have some pressures on our flank because of the anti-Blackness that some people have experienced, and it's sending them to the Black Hebrews community. They want to be still monotheistic, but they want a monotheism that is their own. Yeah. And that's what Hebrewism is offering them. That this is us. We were the original. Look, we kickstarted everything. You see? And then
that's what kind of prompted me to write that post about how Black Muslims should convert to Ibadism.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of tongue in cheek in that, and I know it spanned into like people thinking I was like really serious, but it was because of the foreign domination I seen in Sunniism and Shiism. Well, not so much Shiism, but more so in Sunniism, and how it's kind of depriving converts of their culture, and how Ibadism didn't have as much of an influence as Sunniism does in the West, to where converts could make that more of their own than they could of Sunniism.
Well, I mean, I'm in ill health, and maybe I don't know. I never know whether it's going to be the last time we speak. So I'm the sort of person who will not like pretend for the purposes of who might be listening. But I do have some Ibadi connections in the distant past, but it means nothing to me in the sense that being a Shia or a Zaidi or a Sunni or a Maliki, they really don't mean that much to me. And Islam means more to me than all of those divisions. Those divisions can come later, and if you want to throw in a bit of Sufism, no more the merrier. As long as you keep your Tawheed going and the rest of it going, you can cook what biryani you want and what kabsa, machboos, and whatever else you want to make out there. I think we should be allowed to find, as Caribbean converts or Afro-diasporan converts, we likewise should be allowed to make our peace with our own history. So if sometimes I see conversations that are calling us racist, saying we're dealing with too much critical race theory, calling us reverse racist, I don't entertain those conversations. I leave it for younger people like you to handle. I'm too old and too tired. And I perhaps remember the racism when it was more raw, when it was unadulterated. Now it's a little more sophisticated.
Yeah,
and I haven't the language.
Race, sorry.
Hmm. Go on.
Oh yeah, with things like colorblind racism, where people will try to just act like differences don't exist.
Yep.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps,
Hmm.
and your
Hmm.
situation is totally characterized by your own failings. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with the society you live in. Has nothing
Hmm.
to do with your ethnic background and how you're perceived in this society. Um, so yeah, you are dealing with the more sophisticated type of racism. It's not so for not so not as apparent.
Yeah. Mm. And so that's why I say when people ask, go to the other extreme and tell me now, right, you might be the sort of person, Brother Danjuma, who would like to hear me say, let's not support Palestine. I said, no, I'm not the kind of person who would like to hear you say that at all. Don't try to kidnap me and pull me to where you are. I'm not on the same point on the spectrum of your consciousness. If you want to be there and you can defend it, fine, but you haven't defended it very well so far. So I will tell people, as for me and my circle, I would say to them, even if Palestinians, and it may be true because I'm not a black Palestinian and I haven't experienced living in Palestine as a black Palestinian, but if black Palestinians tell me they feel discriminated against by Arab Palestinians, I will believe them. But it would not cause me to be less supportive of the Palestine cause.
Exactly.
Chinua Achebe, excuse me, the great Igbo Nigerian author, the one you could call him the father of African literature in the English language, in his book Things Fall Apart, which is on my shelf, I wish I had the quotation open, has a quote to the effect that you have to chase away the fox before you reprimand the negligent hen. In other words, we have big problems. Let's deal with that. Let's deal with that, and we can turn around and remind the Palestinians of their duty to their obligations to the black Palestinians. And similarly, you have to talk. It's like one woman said to me about the Algerian War of Independence. French lady I met on safari in Uganda, and she was starting to tell me about how women's rights in Europe are so advanced that she couldn't understand the Algerian War of Independence, and why Frantz Fanon did not mention the sexism among Algerian men. So I said, you were wanting Algerian men to become metrosexual males before they fought the French for independence. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm not saying she doesn't have a point, because we have sisters listening to this who understand the point from the point of view of being sisters. But I do believe that if you wait to become a character, an unimpeachable character of unassailable probity and absolute perfection before you embark upon any cause, you'll never get started.
Oh yeah, you can't wait.
You'll never get started. Yeah, exactly. So my view of this whole idea that black people, yes, we should be looking after. Number one, that's why we became Muslim. I didn't become a Muslim to go and fight in Chechnya. I didn't do that. Although when people do that, I say, well, did you deal with the drugs in your own community? Did you deal with the single parenthood in your own community? Did you uplift the education standard? Or did you kind of black flight from your own community and wear a thobe and think now you're an Arab and you're better than these people? What did you do? I do understand that. I do understand that there are priorities and there are different battles that are more pressing than others. And at times when you're poor, when you're financially poor, you have to know priorities and how you spend your money. I do understand all the rest of it. But I also understand the overarching attraction of the Palestinian issue in Jerusalem, Al-Quds.
And Professor, I don't know how much time you have, but that also led me to another question I had for you. Like, this is a what came first kind of question, did the chicken or the egg? What inspired was it Islam that led you to Pan-Africanism, or was it Pan-Africanism that led you to Islam? Which one had influence over the other?
I think they both came at the same time through different doors, because I grew up in a home where, well, I must explain this. My mother and father separated when I was 4. I was born in England, and I went home with my father to a home which was not African, but I'm African and my brother was African. So we were two African children or mixed race children. I know if I say mixed race, people would fall about laughing because mixed race seems only to apply to one parent is white and one parent is black.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a culture, in a house that was different from anything I'd experienced before until I became used to it. And I understand it now, just like any other culture. But what I'm saying is, because I was an African, for the purposes of that household, I was an African. I was the designated black, put it that way, and my brother. He did now. But we were the blacks in the family. And I have a sister called Halima, she too, but she left early. She went to New York. But we were the blacks in a family that was basically Asian, Indian. So the constant juxtaposition of things would lead you to question, where's yours? Okay, you can see they've got theirs. Where's mine? Where's ours? In terms of culture. And that being Muslim, working with my dad, at the time, most of the people you saw around you as Muslim were Asian, what we call Indian in Trinidad, because remember, they came to Trinidad before partition took place. So we call them Indian, even though some would have been from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, some from Bangladesh, some from Uttar Pradesh, the Gangetic Plain, different parts, but in that time it was just the British Raj. So we still say Indian, but so I'll say Asian for the purposes of who are listening, who may be listening. So I grew up in an Asian household. Okay. As an African.
Nothing yet.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, it's something that I think the headset needs to be charged or something.
Okay. I mean, we've been going for extremely long time. Not extremely long time, really, but
do a part two some other time.
yeah, we definitely do a part two. I was hoping that this went well this time to where you would want to come back for a part two, because
that'd be okay.
I know that with all of the footage I've been watching of you, reading your Facebook posts, all the notes I wanted to take, or some of the notes that I still have, I would not be able to get them all the questions I had out in a reasonable amount of time, and I didn't want to hold you up for too long. But I'm glad everything worked out. I'm not trying to cut anything. I'm not trying to end it or anything.
Did you get any of your questions answered at all?
I did, and a lot came with I got a lot more than what I expected as far as answers went. And you totally took the conversation in a lot of different places, and I'm not complaining about it, because that's exactly how I am. So I definitely appreciate it. And you also just had, just brought more questions to my mind that I would like to ask you. So I really would like to do this again.
Inshallah.
We have a chance.
Inshallah.
So what are weekends normally good for you?
This time of the day, yes, from about 5 o'clock. Because of Asr, I delayed it till 5:30. Yeah. But yeah, I guess around between 5 and 7 is okay. After this time, my health I begin to feel the effects of the evening.
Okay. I tend to wind down a lot in the evening too. My thinking is the same. A lot of what I get done is in the morning, like reading, checking my social media or emails, because I swear after about 4 or 5 o'clock, my mind, as far as any intellectual endeavor, is totally out of commission. But I wanted to interview more people that I've been following for a long time, that I've been wanting to talk to. You're definitely one of them. From the first time hearing you speak in geography is the mother of history, I was like, wow, this guy is extremely knowledgeable. And I bet having a conversation with him is something amazing. And I'm so happy that the trajectory I set myself upon, as far as listening to your talks, talking to other people about your talks, and then finding somebody who knew you personally, I'm glad that glad that this was able to happen today. And Sheikh Hassan also recommended me interviewing you as well, maybe about a month ago. And I sat on it for a while, and it took me some courage to kind of ask you, just because as well as him, when I interviewed him, it was just a random thing. And you too, I'm a bit intimidated because of, the knowledge that you possess. So I was just trying to figure out, how do I approach this interview. I notice a lot of people tend to have you talk about Africa, and I know that's your specialty. One thing I wanted to do was just try to make my audience more familiar with you, because I don't find too much of that out there. And I believe the man behind all the knowledge is and his story is just as important as the information he's conveying. So
yes, I'm glad. Well, I hope your audience does manage to find some of this to be of some use to them. And I hope, it is my earnest and hope that your generation takes up the mantle where we left off. I know there is a feeling abroad among people between 35 to 45 who feel that my generation failed them as Muslims. I understand that feeling, but they have to understand we were building a boat while we were in the middle of the sea. We were building it and trying to sail it at the same time. And I hope that that generation, who some of them were born Muslim and they're in their 40s now, African Caribbeans, who are in their like about 45 now, I hope one day they will view us with a little more leniency than they do at the moment. Inshallah.
You know, I haven't come across that with my generation. Maybe because I'm not 35, I'm 34. I'm just there. So we're not thinking that about the older generation. But I definitely would like to talk to my elders and see and better understand the foundation that they laid, just so my generation can keep this thing going. And I had a talk with Imam Lukman Ahmed last time, and he was talking about, you know, trying to keep the Black Muslim community going, and how he sees our numbers dwindling, trying to formulate a way that we can grow our numbers as the generations go on, so this thing doesn't die out. Because, you know, Blacks are a huge, especially in the West, Blacks are a major factor in Islam, and we should continue to be.
African Americans right now are no longer a convert community. Half of the African American Muslim community is what you call a heritage community now.
Yes.
And they have to be accepted as a heritage community.
Lukman Ahmed's father converted to Islam in the 50s. And so he was raised as a Muslim.
Yeah. So we have to look at things that sort of nuance. Sometimes when I speak about traditional communities, it sounds as though I'm speaking about people from the East only. It's not, you know, the nuance has to be applied there. But I think we should explore that angle, the vanishing Afro-diasporan Muslim community, the next time we talk. I have an essay somewhere in my notes about the flatlining of conversion, particularly in Britain.
You know, it would be interesting to have Lukman Ahmed on as well, because he wrote a book called Double-Edged Slavery. And it mentions the vanishing convert community and the overarching power of the immigrant Muslim community, and how that's also not to where other Blacks, non-Muslim Blacks, aren't seeing Islam as attractive as they used to, not seeing it as it's lost its transformative power, and that African Americans or Black Americans or people of African descent that convert are just going from European domination to Eastern domination.
Exactly. Yes, I'm glad you said it that way. I have said it like that before, and it starts a whole new conversation. And I know you're trying to wrap this up. I would definitely like to have more talks about this.
Make it a series if we can.
Okay, inshallah.
All right, and I'll be more organized, because this conversation, it didn't go. I'm not complaining that it went all over the place. It didn't really go all over the place, but a lot was said. And next time, I'm gonna try to
streamline it a little more. You mean
format it better, because I'm new to this. I'm new to this.
Every time I do this, I'm new to it as well. So, you know, it depends on how my state of health on the day.
Oh, you have an excellent screen presence. I mean, watching you on Content Over Everything, I recommend people to go check you out. He has like 51 videos of you where you're speaking. Some of them you're talking for like an hour, hour and a half. Some of them are short of 9 minutes, but they're definitely worth checking out for anybody who's listening and would like to find out more about you and the topic. Yes.
Brother, thank you so much for the time. And yeah, like you said, you can subdivide it into whichever headings you like, and we can use this one as a template opening talk and we could perhaps structure it from here. I leave it in your hands, inshallah.
Oh, well, I'll be in communication with you. It's pleasant to talk to you. So
An equal
I'll
pleasure.
definitely keep in contact, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this for me. It's totally been a pleasure.
Jazakallah khair, ya Sheikh, and may Allah give us and the whole community, we need health, mental, psychological, to get through this time as much as physical health. And we need to basically know who we are and to be comfortable in our space. We need, the part of what this discussion is going to be about is us getting to be happy with who we are. A lot of us are, I don't want to start a new discussion, but we convert, some of us convert for the wrong reasons. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna just leave that there right now.
All right. Well, assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
And I hope to do this again. And enjoy the rest
Inshallah.
of your day.
Allah ibarak you too. Allah ysallimak.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am going to end it right here.